Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully we are starting to go live on all of our channels, including Irina's YouTube channel, which I have a QR code for too, so I'll put that up in a second. Let me do my little intro quick. Here we go. So we are back for another masterclass with Dr. Irina-Maria. This is part 2 of last time she did Runic Magic. So this time we're doing a bit of a deeper dive specifically on love spells this time. And then she will more than likely be coming back for another one on different. Oh,
Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of technical issues here.
yeah, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me still, Irina?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, cool. I'm hoping it's still live. It is still counting down. So I'm sorry, you guys. I guess we
We're
are
still live, yes.
okay, well, so hello. Welcome back for me. But yeah, so I will go through this quick so Irina can get started. My computer doesn't keep going crazy. But what is SASA? SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. It's our mission to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper past, building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship. We work towards our goal of inspiring a wide, inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. So we do this in many ways. We have live streams of masterclasses about once a month with Irina. Oh, and then my PowerPoint just disappeared randomly. I don't know what's going on with the tech today. That's okay. Let me see if I can get back on. Otherwise, I do have this basically memorized. So said it about 200 times in my life, probably. Okay. So yes, check out the things that SASA does. We have our virtual conference at the end of the month too, which is a free public virtual conference streamed to a bunch of different pages. You can RSVP for reminders of that on our events page. Where to find SASA? You can search Save Ancient Studies Alliance on pretty much any platform. We post on social media multiple times a day. And like I said, we do these streams and stuff too, of which the recordings are saved on our YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook pages. Irina's masterclasses are also saved on her YouTube channel as well. Okay, some protocol for the event. Please be kind and respectful. Listen and ask thoughtful questions. We do want to hear from you guys. Whatever platform you're watching this on has a chat feature, and we will get your chat messages. And so that Irina can read your questions and stuff too and answer them during the stream. Obviously, please be patient with technology and those administering it. I guess today is the day that I'm having tech issues. So thank you for being patient with us. Again, these are streamed and recorded and put on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and mostly have fun. Last but not least, if you like what you see from SASA, we are a small nonprofit organization. So really any size donation goes very far with us. You can become a recurring donor for as little as $3 a month, or make a one-time donation anytime. We also have a bookshop where part of the proceeds come back to us, and they're discounted books anyway. It's like cheaper than everywhere else, and we get part of the proceeds, so that's great. And we have a bazaar where you can buy different SASA and ancient themed merchandise. So go and check those out. And with that, I will hand it over to Irina before I hopefully keep having more tech issues. Real quick, Irina, I am going to put the QR code on the screen for your YouTube channel as well. And then I can do that later towards the end of the stream too. But this is Irina's YouTube channel. So please do go follow her and check out. She has lots of more informational videos and kind of masterclass like things like we do with her. And then our masterclasses that she does with us are saved there as well. So you can find all of that fun. I'll leave that on the screen for a second. But Irina, you can take it away. Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you very much for the wonderful collaboration. And I'm very happy to be able to continue with this fascinating topic about runic magic or historical runic magic, because last time I tried to show you a couple of examples of enabling spells. Most of them, I think, were enabling spells. So they are these kind of like small messages, especially written on weapons to empower them. But we also discuss some healing spells, as well as some very standardized, so to speak, dedications, such as the alu bracteates, or more largely speaking, inscriptions. And we came to the conclusion that we can consider runes so in themselves as a kind of magic. If you think about the fact that writing in itself was a kind of power, but not anyone had, and it was also reserved to those who were more knowledgeable, and that's why we also have Odin as a keeper of this sacred knowledge with a lot of magical attributes. So I would say that rather than the letters themselves, we can consider the act of using them as an act of magic. And you're going to find a lot of inscriptions in the corpus with multiple functions. This is because, well, essentially during pre-Christian times, religion and magic were inseparable. So we have examples of amulets and different objects used for protection or enabling spells, like I said before, ensuring luck, as well as cursing somebody, warding off evil. And what we're going to be talking about today, which is the question of whether we also have some kind of love inscription, so potential magical significance in the largely speaking runic world. I am using this very broad term because unfortunately from the Viking times, there's not really much material with this particular function. So I'm going to be referring rather to the migration period, or what is known as the Merovingian period. So that is kind of like between the 5th and the 7th century AD, before the start of the Viking Age, or the between the migration period and the start of the Viking Age, broadly speaking. And then I'm going to jump a little bit into the Middle Ages. And with the Viking Age, we don't really have any kind of material. And disclaimer before we start with the examples, there is no really yes or no answer to this question, whether we do have love inscriptions, because as you will see, most of them are very problematic in the sense that it's very difficult to consider them magical in the sense of trying to manipulate or induce some kind of behavior, or trying to control the environment, and in this particular case control someone. So many of these inscriptions, they can also be considered kind of like poems or just scribblings, so it's not really that clear, right? But if we go a little back to the Greek and Roman world, here you're going to find a lot of examples, actually short amatory messages, such as "love me" or something of the sort, which have an erotic function. They do concern love or marriage or faithfulness, even lust and sex, but they're not necessarily romantic. Romance is yet again a concept which is more or less modern, or at least it stems from the High Middle Ages, the idea of romantic love, of courtly love. We do have magical texts imploring or demanding love, rather, or fidelity, or sex from the owner of the item, where we have the inscription, or from a different person. One very common term you're going to find in texts, texts dealing with the classical world, is agoge, which kind of like means leading charm, so a charm that you use in order to provoke some kind of reaction from another person. And some of them are really coarse and not prudish at all. So in comparison to nowadays, I have always found the Roman world to be from this point of view much less prudish than we are nowadays. For example, you will find the Mad inscription, which is very fascinating. It's on a broken piece of pottery, and it consists an enumeration of the letters of the Roman alphabet, which has a magical function. We also discussed that last time, because we also have inscriptions, and quite often which essentially list the letters of the Futhark, so of the runic alphabet, and this would have had an empowering function. Yeah, of course, some people would have practiced it, like writing letters to practice writing, but then again, when you have a broader context, a more specific context, you can also consider this as a kind of empowering formula. And in this particular inscription, the Mad inscription, which you can find in the documents of the Heinisches Museum für Philologie, it's an older work. It has been updated, but yeah, you have a lot of such inscriptions documented. You have this guy Artus, who apparently was a bit of a mischievous man, because he's called the fucker, for lack of a better word. And the person who concocted this inscription essentially says that he is going to bind him. So bind him in the sense that perhaps prevent him from continuing with his bad behavior, so to desist from his ways. So these are rather common in classical charms, but we do tend to find something similar, although not that explicit like in the Roman world. So in the Merovingian period, also, I already told you, these are rather unclear because we don't really know their function, or we cannot say 100% or whether we're dealing with something magical or with something else. But potential candidates, so to speak, are, for example, the Shani brooch. This is an interesting piece because it's in the Burgundian dialect of the Old Germanic, and we don't really have much material here. It's rather poorly understood, and it dates from the 6th century. So it is in the period of the supremacy of Old Burgundian kings. And the inscription essentially says that Liano should discover Ida. We have two names here: may Liano discover Ida, or be led to Ida. And what is also interesting here is that we seem to have a Christian context. So the amulet seems to be one that aims to help its owner find a lover in the first place. And then you also have the Futhark row with you won't find all the letters here, but I think that 21 or 20 out of the 24 letters of the Elder Futhark. At any rate, it's used to reinforce the charm, most likely. And then you have something more or less intelligible, possibly an abbreviation of Christ. And this was also common in the late Roman world, from the monogram made out of the first two letters, which spell Christ in Greek. And you also find what is potential a reference to a Gnostic name for God the Father. So this combination, very interesting potential, old runic Germanic magic plus the Christian context. An item which has been a source of dispute a very long time is a brooch from Switzerland from the 6th century. Don't know what the image doesn't work. It wasn't an image from this brooch anyway, because I don't really have an image from that. You cannot find it on Wikipedia or on any other site. You can only find it in the studies that have been done about it. I just wanted to show you what it looks like, but apparently it's not working. At any rate, I'm going to tell you briefly a couple of things about it. This was a very interesting one because of the first word it starts with, frifridil, which is a duplicate here. The first syllable is a duplicate, and the initial attempts at deciphering it, some of the runes are wiped out, by the way, so it's kind of difficult to read it, if not impossible. But initially, it has been considered a love spell, with the encoding being "Dear beloved, desire me," and on the brooch you're going to find a double L rune, which in many contexts can be interpreted as an abbreviation for the word leek. Actually, the name of the rune can also mean leek, according to runic poems. At any rate, because of this, it has been considered that it may have something to do with lust and love and fertility, because of this connection between leek and the phallic element. So the leek in itself is a vegetable associated with lust and with the phallus in Germanic tradition. But the problem is, and this is something that has been done in the past few years, the problem is that actually only the first line is interpretable, the one with Frifridel, and the other two lines seem to have been over-interpretations, because the newest research states that they don't actually have anything to do with one another because of the way they're written, and because the second and third line seem to be written in a way that doesn't correspond with the first one. They are more crooked, for example. It's not very clear. Not all the runes are clear, and definitely the carver, the runic carver, was the one who wrote the first line, and we don't really know who wrote the second and third lines, but it's pretty obvious that it was not the same person. So if you read the newer interpretations, when you have such such a case, you're going to find, for example, an interpretation in the sense of performative action of multidimensional communication. I'm quoting here from the last study on this, which essentially states that when you're dealing with a prestigious object such as a brooch, you're also dealing with owners, multiple owners, and other carvings that have been performed on that brooch in a newer context. And as a result, the writing system is not always homogeneous. It's not only always unitary, and writing, at least in the second carvings, did not function as a means of linguistic communication. Sometimes it could have performed other functions, such as the graphic appearance, which would have placed it in a cultural context, but not in a clear linguistic ones. So yeah, perhaps it was indeed a love amulet, but on the other hand, in the current state of research, it has been overviewed. It has been over overanalyzed, and the conclusion in this point is that it's actually an overinterpretation, and the graphs are not reliable epigraphically at all. And we also need to be very careful when we find this kind of runic writing, because it's not always linguistically clear. And the brooch also has this weird comb-like symbol, which is again something that has been interpreted as rather decorative, but at any rate not linguistic. So this was our candidate, which seems to have failed the test, unfortunately. Nevertheless, you do find amateur runic finds, all coming from the current territory of Germany and dating back to the 6th and 7th century, so the so-called Merovingian period. And they're very interesting because they have this term leob on them, with its variants, leobo, leoba, leobi, or other forms of declension. The word can be traced back to leopas, a Proto-Germanic word having to do with love. And we can consider them abbreviated love charms when we find them, usually when a single word is written on a stone or on a stick or on a bracteate, on whatever. We assume that this was amuletic or a charm word, but then again, this is not without its problems. It's much like the leek that we find on the Bülach inscription, which may not have been a leek at all if this interpretation is correct. However, we can consider the amulets with this term leob as something used to perhaps win the love of a potential love interest. We do have some more or less straightforward examples. In Schletzheim, for example, we have a brooch of inscription which says simply, "For the wayfarer love, Sidwagan in Leobo." We also have another object from the same place, from Schletzheim. This time it's a locket. A locket meaning it was an object where perfume was kept, and they even discovered some traces of the perfume. And this inscription is quite unclear, or at least it's not that clear as the previous one. And this one says something about two people. We have a legend here, Arogis and Alagunth, apparently two people here, but it's kind of pidgin. I think the legend is not really that clear. We find the love description agreeing in gender with the name that precedes it, but then again the verb which follows is in the plural, so it appears to have referred to the two people indicated here, to both names, although it is not really really clear which line of the text that was. So it's a bit scrambled, this inscription. And the term itself is quite difficult to decipher, because some of the Leob inscriptions are somewhat laconic, other ones are not. Sometimes they even feature verbs, but usually it's not really that obvious whether we're dealing with the noun love or with the adjective beloved, so with the action being specified. But at any rate, it's interesting that we have these finds from Schätzheim, so both the brooch and the capsule used by women for holding perfume. These are, at any rate, very rich graves, so it was definitely something, someone important here. Another inscription was discovered on an item in the southern village of Neudingen. It's on a distaff, and here you have something quite similar. It's a love inscription, so a dedication for someone called Hamal. And you also have the person who wrote the runes specified. Then again, it's very difficult to say whether these inscriptions were actually meant to work as magic, so for attracting love, or whether they were just, some form of dedications. It's difficult to say whether they were charms or not, whether they had this amuletic function. Right, what else can we find? We can also talk about a disc brooch discovered in Bad Krotzingen. This one essentially states that someone called Boba wishes love, or the best for somebody called Ayerik. It's a very elliptical formula, very, very basic style, underlying several of the other German amatory texts as well. I'm not very fond of this kind of inscription because, like I said, it's not very clear what was meant, what the message was, unlike the enabling spells we talked about last time, which were more formulaic, because you always had, or you often had, the person making the dedication, and also the object, or some kind of name of the object, and the function was a bit clearer than on this type of inscription. Right. We have some interesting ones from Weimar as well. We have a bow brooch example. So this was a type of brooch you can also see here in the image. Again, excavated from a woman's grave, and with an unclear message, because you essentially have somebody called Haribrig here, and Hiba Ljubi Leob. So Haribrig is a name that can be more or less deciphered, because you have Hari here, which is a word for army, and you have Brig, probably an inversion here from the stem birk, which has to do something with protection. So it could have been a protection spell, perhaps protection of the beloved, or something like that. And you do have this more or less duplicate of Lub and Leob, which again poses philological problems. Because love, if an adjective, then it would be dear, beloved, and then you're left with Leob, which may have also been a personal name. That's also a hypothesis. At any rate, we do find another Leob inscription from the same place, from Weimar, this time inscribed on a belt buckle, that presumably belonged to another woman, to another Ida Bigina, which could have been a nickname, because you can decipher the Bigina here as a little purchase or something like that, if you really want to translate it. It's related linguistically to the verb to buy. And probably a nickname of Ida, unless the reference was to the object itself. That's also something you can have in this context. At any rate, the problem is with the second part of the inscription, because apparently where Leob has been reconstructed, we only have a letter, but only 3 letters were added by the runologists studying it. However, the traces indicate that there were at least 5 or even 6 runes here. So this interpretation is also under a big question mark, and probably at another a deeper analysis will show that we are dealing with another word if it is decipherable at all. Some of them are not decipherable even with all the technical advancements because they cannot be read anymore because they're very, very worn out. And then again, for others, the new technology has functioned. If you analyze them under microscope, you're definitely going to discover more than you would have been able to know in the 19th century, for example. So the question really remains with this kind of inscription from the Merovingian times, whether it was an amatory legend, is a everyday expression, whether it was a posy inscription, a formulaic magic charm. So what were these objects? Actually, there is no definite way to say what they were. It is often only the context that tells us whether this legend would have also had some kind of magical significance, such as perhaps the one stating the protection of the beloved, perhaps. Right, if you move on a couple of centuries, you're going to end up in medieval Bergen in Norway, which is a very interesting place because it is full of sticks, of runic sticks, with very interesting messages. And these messages, nevertheless, unlike the Merovingian period, where, let's say, you can find some kind of magical connotation, especially when you have inscriptions with very few words, which tend to or seem to indicate some kind of dedication of magical use. Most of the runic inscriptions you're going to find in Bergen, because it's the medieval times, so I'm talking here about the 12th, 14th century. A lot of them are very long, first of all, so they have this narrative function rather than a magical one. And they do seem to be rather mundane, even very coarse, sometimes witty expressions, and not really magical ones. So you're going to find, for example, stuff like Nicolas an conuseri vel girider heitir stup dochtir pitas rögnum. So Nicholas loves well the woman called Girit, the stepdaughter of Peter Ragnar. So somebody really felt the need to write that down on a stick. On another stick, you can find a message such as Aus an set ek weet, short for a name here. We don't really know which name, but at any rate, what I like most of these inscriptions is the use of the verb unna, which still exists nowadays in Scandinavian and in German as well, but in German it is gönnen. And this verb stems from an old root, the Proto-Germanic unana, and it essentially means not to love, but to allow someone else a benefit. So you can see a little bit the cultural difference here. So loving actually meant tolerating someone, which I find actually meant tolerating someone, which so I kind of find fascinating this aspect that we're not really dealing with romantic love here, or we're on the way to that. But in this point, we have this more pragmatic meaning of love. Yeah, so it's not very easy to discern simple messages from amuletic usages. At any rate, there seemed to be some kind of clue that there would have been at least something magical going on here, because on many of these inscriptions you can find the first three letters of the runic alphabet, so furth, which also happens to be a word for female genitalia. So the question that we can ask ourselves here is whether this would have also been considered a lucky charm, pretty much in the sense that if you write the whole alphabet, you would have empowered the inscription. And maybe if you wrote the first three letters, because you also have had this meaning, which indicates also something into the direction of fertility and lust and so on, perhaps it could have been considered a lucky charm. Then again, there is always the risk of overinterpreting. So maybe they just wanted to be funny and used a witty phrasing. You can find phrasings such as this one on a belt bronze buckle from Gotland, from the island, where you have three names, Thorkel, Thorhildr, and Ulfkel, and intercalated between the third and the second name, you have Fudh. So, well, did it mean something? Was it used to offend perhaps one of these people mentioned here on the inscription, or not? At any rate, it's you can find similar examples in Sigtuna, in on a rib bone, or even in Schleswig. These irregular, sometimes very crude texts using these three letters. Right. And speaking of crude, yeah, you can also use it in the so-called nith, which is more or less an insult, if you want to translate it. So the kind of insult that was really not acceptable socially. So in Lund in Sweden, we have a mention of a vagina demon, apparently. And in Bergen again, we have the following inscription: Fettleger furdes in billi futhork, which essentially means foul is the drink bearer to the vagina. And then we have the term vagina mad, which we can consider to be perverse. So somebody was, yeah, essentially warning someone else, or perhaps insulting them in a very crude way, of not being submissive, because we're dealing with a society, and it was the same in the Viking Age. And I think then the Christian mentality drew on that and made it much worse, in the sense that not being masculine enough, so being the kind of submissive, effeminate person, was something really, really frowned upon in society, and perhaps such a person who appeared to be a little too submissive towards a woman would have definitely been on the brink of social acceptance. So it's very interesting to see mentalities here at work. Further description on a piece of wood from Bergen is similarly blunt. Ranveik raudus kaltu serda, thatsie mera en manstreder och mina en hästreder. You will have intercourse, for lack of a better way of paraphrasing it, with Ranveig the red, and it will be larger than a man's prick and smaller than a horse's prick. So yeah, this kind of expression, perhaps it wasn't meant to be taken seriously at all, and again, we're overinterpreting it. But then again, this mention of the horse organ is also interesting, because we do have references, and a lot of them, both in earlier and later sources, with the horse organ and the leek, and other similar objects having this quality of, yeah, indicating fertility, of being associated with fertility charms, or at least a small indication to that. But then again, it may have just been a very witty message written by somebody in medieval Bergen, because it apparently is a very prolific place. A lot of people were engaged in this activity between the 12th and 14th century. It's very interesting. Better candidates for this description of being magic, I think, are the inscriptions where you do find a demand. So you do find this idea of asking for someone to love you, and we do have some interesting examples here. Simply a kiss me, or something a little more complex. We can even find them in more or less likely places, such as stave churches, like in the Gold Stave Church in Oslo, with a message of this type: kiss au mig því at ek ervida. So kiss me because I am troubled. So I demand you to kiss me to take my troubles away. Right. So many of the direct appeals for love even demand some kind of direct reciprocity, and they're not really amuletic inscription of a clear formulaic kind, as we have seen in the other types of inscriptions. They have this narrative connotation to them. In Lödöse in Sweden, you can find something similar. Aust min, kiss me, so my beloved, kiss me. In this sense, this is also something you find from Bergen. The one from Lödöse actually says, "Ver tu vinner min, be my friend." very interesting. And yeah, other examples include a rib bone from, again, Uslu, an sauthier eraristi runar thessar thordis. So he who carved these runes loves you, Thordis. And then the reverse continues, Thora ekkan Yilia. Thora, I can seduce. This also sounds like a warning, and we actually do have some interesting references to, this idea of seducing and of forcing essentially the woman to engage in some kind of amorous relationship with you. Odin does that quite a lot. If you read the both the poetic and the prose Edda, he's a very treacherous god, and he is very well versed in runecraft. He boasts plenty of times his amorous conquests. For example, when he has this fight with his son in the poem of Harbardr. Harbardr being one of his many names, and he brags about him using a lot of love spells, mighty love spells on witches to seduce them, to take them from their men, and in order to gain knowledge. There's also the myth of the mead of poetry, and one of the reasons why Odin can acquire the mead of poetry is because he managed to seduce a giantess. And you also have the poem for Skirnis from the Poetic Edda, where the god Freyr is obsessed with the giantess by the name of Gerder, and he essentially calls upon his servant Skirnir to go and seduce this woman for him, and he cannot do it with kind words from the beginning, so he resorts to all kinds of threats, and this is somehow resembling the rib bone from Oslo, where apparently the carver also uses a threat. So I can seduce you. Yeah, be careful. There is no use in rejecting me. Right. Some of them do have a poetic quality. Sorry, I will have to refresh this briefly because I really need to show you the inscription. Yeah, we do have finds from both Bergen and even from Anglo-Saxon poetry, with a couple of interesting finds. Yeah, technology is not my thing either today. But, kindly ask you to be a little patient. Got Okay, I hope this is going to work. Yeah, thank you. See it now. The poetic magical quality. Let's try to present it now. This is when it happens. I'm also hearing some noise in the background. I don't think it's from me. Okay, right. I'm going to go now. So, inscriptions, like I said, do have this magical quality, and here I wonder whether they are rather poems or whether they are some kind of incantations or charms. You can find them in some Anglo-Saxon poems, for example, if you look in the Exeter book, and I actually recommend you do that because the Exeter book has some very, very excellent riddles, great examples of excellent riddles. The poetic form, although it doesn't really seem magical at first glance, it can be considered magical because poetry was a mnemonic device back in the day, and it is often thought capable of increasing the power of spells, which, they were actually often chanted or sung. So, in this sense, there is also a connection, definitely, between poetry and magic. And the fact that in medieval Iceland, the writing of love poetry was forbidden, this should also tell you something about the way people perceived poetry. And one example is from Bergen, from the 12th century. Kan ik säga þér sem þú mant reyna af mér att jag skall unna þér engover en mer. I can say to you, as you will experience with me, that I will love you no less than myself. So that's very nice of someone to write in 12th century Bergen. It also reveals a little bit about our shared humanity, if you will, our shared emotions and the power of emotions. You are going to find several examples from the same place. Another example states that I thought myself blessed when we sat together and no person came between us. So some of them, they are really sensitive and emotional. And you're also going to find examples of unrequited desire or unhappy love affairs. These are also some features of Norse inscriptions, such as this one here. Again, back in Bergen on a stick dating to about 1300. After recording a transaction, we do have this very unhappy runic scribe complaining in verse very beautifully. However, the meaning of what he says is not really that clear. It kind of reminds a little bit of skaldic poetry, which is this very complex poetry with a lot of kenningar, complex metaphors, very difficult to decipher. So he basically says something about wise vor of wire makes me sit unhappy, and the air of mackerel's ground takes often and much sleep from me. So it's definitely a text with poetic riddles. However, I don't think it is any kind of spell. I just think it is a poem with a lot of interesting metaphors. Vår here is a Norse goddess of marriage and also of oaths. It is probably also the origin of the term Varangians, which you know from the Varangian god in the Byzantine Empire. But at any rate, he seems to be saying that women make him miserable. And Eir is also kind of like a mysterious figure. Probably had something to do with the healing. The fish ground, or the mackerel's ground, is possibly a metaphor for gold. Maybe the goddess of the gold appearing here, and this can be a metaphor for a woman wearing a lot of jewelry, for example. It's plausible here. So at any rate, in spite of this difficulty understanding the metaphor, more than likely this refers to a woman who takes a lot of sleep from this very unhappy scribe, and this is something that you're going to find in other Norse sources as well. This idea of the woman taking the sleep from men and not letting them, perform their regular duties. Women causing hardship and heartache and so on and so forth. That was also going on in Bergen in the 12th and 13th century. Right. Other combinations or other functions you can find are reminiscent of what was going on continental Europe. So we are in this direction of chivalric love, chivalric romances, especially because there were contacts between Norway and Iceland as well, because Iceland in the 13th century, at any rate, came under the control of Norway, and through this connection, there were a lot of influences from European continental literature. You also have the legendary sagas, for example, with there's also old Germanic material recycled there, but there is also a great deal of influence from continental Europe, because women in the newer sagas, in sagas from 13th, 14th, 15th century, and so on and so forth, seem to be these creatures only causing trouble. And whereas in old Germanic literature, they had a lot of agency and they were capable of a lot of things. They were stronger characters. In the legendary sagas, they do seem to be having this very problematic agency for men as well. So they're a little more misogynistic, I would say, these later sources in concerning the position of of women. At any rate, you're going to find these chivalric traits in some of the rune sticks from Bergen as well. This is actually an earlier one. It's from the 12th century, so it's not from the period of chivalric influence. However, it does have some chivalric traits because it is speaking about this very profound desire somebody is having for somebody else's wife. So it's not really consumed. It is an adulterous desire, but it is not consumed. Annex svo konumans at mér þykir kaldur eldur. En ekki vinur vifstessa, osa. So I love a man's wife that even fire seems cold to me, and I am a friend of this woman. So, yeah, somebody did not want to be friend zone in 12th century Bergen. Very interesting how much we have in common. Yeah, other uses. You also find curses sometimes. Somebody seeking revenge, for example, for one reason or the other. Binding spells, but unlike the binding spell, the intent of the curse is not to lead to a lover or hold back a lover, but instead seek revenge. And I do believe that this is actually a good example for magical use, because you also have this abracadabra case. You have an unintelligible, or not unintelligible, but at any rate, a formulaic use of a couple of runes at the end of the inscription. So yeah, Sigvar Ingmar hava mun mik graut. Sigvors Ingimar shall have my weeping, and then you have this formula. So I don't think this is a posy text. Yeah, I do think this is really associated with women's work, and it's kind of clear that it does have this magical connotation. At least it's a cursing spell. And the same thing you're going to notice on another object. It's a wooden beater from Bergen. This is also very interesting because of the objects on which these curses appear. So the first one was on a weaving tablet, and this time we have a weaving beater. So these are objects associated with woman activity, female activity, and the idea of weaving is recurrent in Norse literature and mythology as being an area of power associated with women. Ila hevir sá maður hevir slíka konu. So evil take the man who has such a woman. There's somebody being very jealous here. Yeah, very interestingly, you also have Latin love amulets, or at least some kind of combinations between Latin and Norse words or runes. They definitely have been inspired to a certain extent by love poetry, for example, by the collection Carmina Burana, which is a 13th century codex stemming from a Benedictine monastery in Bavaria. And yeah, a lot of versions of these poems are also found in other medieval continental collections, and they probably circulated throughout the whole of Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries. Thus, the influence. Yeah, we have a runic Latin love amulet, for example, in the old monastery and hospital of Ibholt in Denmark. It's made out of bone, and it dates to about the first half of the 13th century. And it seems to have contained a longer text, a Latin text. Now it's only fragmentary, but at any rate, it seems to indicate something about love, about this idea of leading towards love, perhaps with gold, something also identify here, auro, and then a word that seem to be referring to an angel. Now, there isn't really that much of surprise that we can find love charms in monasteries as well, because we have some papal complaints from the time about the clergy preparing love potions, as well as some of the priests practicing magic as well. We have a small rune stick found in the Urnes-stave church in Norway, of informing us of a certain priest by the name of Arni, who wanted to have somebody called Inga. So, yeah. That's also something to look out for. Yeah, this whole context of the Christian context was not devoid of magical connotations. On the contrary, we do have a lot of references as well to magicians in the Middle Ages being considered some kind of priests, or at any rate, a lower a kind of priest, also dealing sometimes with divination and so on and so forth. But that was perfectly acceptable as long as you had God's permission, one way or another. Right. Yeah, we also have some examples from Greenland. Yeah, as far afield as Greenland, there are some rune sticks with corruptions of texts, but we do have some indications of alliterative patterns here. You can see it also has this very weird looking form. And the stick also has a dragon-like appearance. It has a knotted surface. It was discovered in Narsak. That's really close to Brattahlid, which was the settlement installed by Eric the Red. It contains some cryptic runes as well, and it seemed to have something to do with the sea, and a word play on the sea, the sea, the sea. It was repeated 3 times, where Osa sits, and Bibrau is the name of the maid who is sitting on the blue. It's very hard to interpret what the author meant when writing this. It does seem to have a very vague resemblance to a poem called Vafthrudnismol. It is a poem from the Poetic Edda. It's a very fascinating poem where Odin and Vafthrudnir, a wise giant, compete with riddles. They try to guess some essential mythological concepts in this poem. We do have a mention of a corpse swallow who sits at the end of heavens, for example. But it's not really that clear whether these metaphors have anything to do with one another. I don't really think so. I rather think that it is a play of some kind, a word play based on an assonant word, and the text has a lot of possible meanings, and it's a primitive kind of verse thing. It's just a word play on this word, the sea, as well as the name Orsa. And sorry, it's not the only one. If you go back to Bergen and look on a couple of more rune sticks, you're going to find longer and similar inscriptions with relevant parts, juxtaposition of pagan and Christian elements. For example, see the beautiful woman, see where she sits. Perhaps we can interpret such an inscription as being magical, in the sense that you kind of induce this idea of finding someone, of being led to someone, and gaining a potential lover in this sense. Yeah, so this is about everything we have regarding this topic. It's kind of disappointing if we compare it to the many healing and enabling empowering spells written on weapons, but essentially that's about it. We have these Merovingian amulets making use of the word leub, which seem to have been a local development. It's not really paralleled in the north, and we have items such as jewelry and distaffs, brooches, for example, so on. And then again, moving on to the medieval times in Norway in particular, or in Scandinavia more generally speaking, we have these objects such as rune sticks, which were really the preferred form of writing, and they do seem to have this either poetic or narrative function, and not really that related to magic, apart from these examples I already presented to you with these very explicit kind of like formulae where somebody is trying to induce someone or manipulate or lead towards a particular goal. And then the other question would refer to fertility spells, whether we have examples of that as well. Well, yes, but then again, like in the case of love spells, the examples are rather problematic and fragmentary. However, we do have some clues here as well. Again, we have the leek as a phallic herb. It was very common in the Germanic world. Generally speaking, in medicine, in order to revive, in order to heal, and they are recorded. The use of the leek is recorded in curative recipes preserved in Old Norse literature, as well as in medical treatises written in Old English. But it also had this connotation of virility, masculinity, a metaphor for virility. For example, in the Volsunga saga, the hero Sigurd is referred to as the green leek growing from the ground. So I think it's pretty explicit here what was meant. Right. And you can also find it, for example, on a bone instrument for preparing meat, a meat scraper from Fløksan in Norway. Reading, well, there are actually three words here: Lina, Laukas, and Fehu. This suggests a generic charm, so something having to do with fertility, and perhaps the object itself is also indicative of that. And you can also find it quite often in the repetition of the L rune, so the Lagos rune, and this is actually quite the good candidate for this idea of the rune being used as a charm. This also reminds us of the tale of Volsi. The tale of Volsi is, well, a very interesting one. It's a later one, Volsathotter, and it essentially translates as the tale of the penis, because it deals with what seems like an ancient ritual, but through a Christian lens, because we have a Christian king there who tries to convince some people to convert, and these people are farmers, and they perform this very bizarre ritual with a horse's penis being essentially being covered by leeks and wrapped in linen and turned into this ritualistic object, and everyone touching it has to say some kind of prayer, and it is indicative of a fertility cult. Otherwise, the story in itself is very funny because of the subject matter, because the fact that everyone who touches it has to say this strophe, has to recite this piece of poetry, and it's also kind of funny. But for somebody living in the old Germanic world, this would have been quite a serious deal. So first of all, the use of the leek in these fertility magic rituals, as well as the association with the horse. So if you have so much usage of the leek, you would expect to have at least as much usage of the horse. So Ehwas, the old name. Horses were extremely important in the old Germanic world, in the old Norse world. You are going to find a lot of graves, for example, of important chieftains having been buried with the horse. Horses were also consumed, and you also find a lot of stories in Norse mythology with horses performing some pretty incredible tasks. Odin's eight-legged horse, Sleipnir, who also seems to have this this function of connecting the worlds, because Hermod, a son of Odin, goes and pays a visit to Balder in the underworld, and he does so using Sleipnir. So this function of connecting between the world of the living and the world of the dead seem to have had something to do with the horses as well. But the whole word, the ehwas, doesn't really come up. We have abbreviations for it. One way or another on several inscriptions, and this is also particularly interesting. It doesn't really appear in connection to the leek, at least explicitly. However, we can think of it when it appears alone or in combination with 2-3 other words as being a charm word, such as the word hagala, which is to hail. Horses are also very much featured on bracteates from the migration period and from the Merovingian period. So these thin medallions worn around the neck, and not we don't really have a complete correspondence between the inscriptions themselves and the pictures, but definitely due to the frequency with which they appear, the horses on these golden pendants would have definitely had a significance, significance of prowess, and also of sovereignty, definitely something associated with chieftains and kings, and so on, as well as this sacrificial element. Yeah, because if you read, for example, the saga of Hrafnkel, you're going to find a sacred horse, or a horse which is dedicated to Freyr, which is very important to the main character of the saga, Hrafnkel, and it's also going to lead him into a lot of trouble. And then you have the saga of Håkon the Good, and here you also have interesting scene, which is reminiscent of these old Germanic rituals, because King Håkon at some point is required to drink from a broth made from the flesh of a sacrificed horse as a part of a pagan ritual, and the farmers are really insisting on him doing that. So it must have been very, very significant back in the day. Right. Another example is from the saga of Hervor, where we have a Swedish king by the name of Ingi, having been driven out of his realm because he was a Christian, and he banned the old sacrifices, and he was then replaced by his pagan brother-in-law, who became known as Sacrifice, or the sacrificial Svein, and he reinstituted the ancient sacrifice. And the saga tells that a horse was led up to the thing and shared out for eating, and then the sacrificial tree was reddened with the blood. So even if the saga is very new, so 14th century is a late saga, we do have these small clues of something having been going on centuries before, this idea of sacrifice, of animal sacrifice, which was very important. This connotation of community doing something together, performing a sacrifice. Yeah, old Germanic religion was very much a religion of praxis, so of practice, rituals, and these rituals took place within the community. So it wasn't really about dogmas, or about reading from a sacred book, as we have it in monotheistic religion. So that's why, I keep insisting on this idea that what you did was much more important than what you believed. And in this whole belief system, horses seem to have had an important role as well. Right. Interestingly, this word only survived in Icelandic, in the Icelandic yor. The other terms have to do with other words. In English, for example, we have mare, which stems from the old word mar, which apparently meant a war horse, and then you have the term hengist, which is in modern German and the Scandinavian languages, stallion. And hengist, interestingly, is also an Old English hero. Have the legend of Hengist and Horsa. So in the sense, because you have actual legendary chieftains or heroes called horses, this is also indicative of the horse being a symbol of prowess, of sacrifice, and supernatural fertility, and so on and so forth. So chieftaincy associated deeply with this animal. But yeah, we also have a connection with something else, with a cult, the cult of the North Italic goddesses Reitia. This is also indicative of the contacts between old Germanic peoples and Italic, Celtic populations, respectively, because in this particular cult, North Italian, yeah, we also have horses being representative of fertility. And one of the epithets of this goddess seemed to have been pora, so that is essentially the leaky one, a description that clearly refers to fertility. So these two elements, leeks and horses, do seem to have had a broader cultural impact. And here you can see the different connections between the Germanic, the Italic, and the Celtic world. This is something we also discussed in connection with the term alu, appearing on a lot of the inscriptions, and seemingly meaning dedication. Exactly, bringing me to the last point of discussion. Yeah, so the term alu, if you have a look on runestones, you're not really going to find it. However, you do find it on one important runestone, on the LSM stone, and it's just a stone with this word. Now, the term alu, the most probable explanation for it is that of dedication. It's not really clear whether it had something to do with fertility or not. But it does appear on all kinds of objects, often in isolation, and it also often appears on weapons, as discussed last time. This huge granite stone from Norway also suggests that rune stones themselves could have been amuletic texts. However, this is a particular example because it was found in a burial mound, so it may have been in this magical funerary context. Right. Yeah, it's not really unusual that we have all kinds of references to this topic of stones being also considered phallic symbols. In pagan times in the north, fertility and abundance were often symbolized by erect penises, and it also is something that Adam of Bremen noticed in his description of the image of the god Freyr in Uppsala shortly before the year 1200s. And he describes the statue as having a much exaggerated phallus. So in the sense, were runestones also phallic symbols? The older ones, I think so. So, for example, between 200 and 700, so in the early Norse world, you're going to find holy white stones, as they are called in literature, and they are carved in the shape of these huge erect penises, unlike what 19th century scholars said, that they look like mushrooms. It's not really a mushroom, is it? Yeah. So when you find in the landscape a lot of monuments looking like this, uninscribed, just these standing stones, which are very, very dominant in the landscape, they do look like something resembling an attempt at drawing the forces of fertility towards your community, or something in that sense. Also interesting, in the Bronze Age, in Scandinavia, you can also find cupstones, and these cupstones were actually stones with orifices in them. So you could have placed offerings in these spaces, and this was again something indicative of either a funerary practice or a fertility rite, or perhaps both of them. A later reference, the Kristni saga, the Icelandic saga of Christianization, even tells of the land spirits, of the landvættir, the guardian spirits living in stones, and that is why many such stones had to be held in the dwelling places of the sacred land spirits, so they can have a home as well. Yeah, and if you look at the Gotlandic picture stones, which are these stones, really pictorial stones specific to the island of Gotland, with potentially mythological scenes. Some of them can be identified, but then again, you always need to be careful when you read the texts. If you can identify something in these pictures, or whether again this is an overinterpretation, it's always a problem here. But at any rate, some of them do have this shape as well, and the question again that arises is whether that was intentional or whether that was just by accident. And yeah, most likely it was intentional as well. So it definitely had some kind of power using this shape. Yeah, regarding the inscription, the last thing I'm going to discuss is a series of interesting stones which seem to be connected to one another, and which indeed um, do seem to indicate something going on in the area of fertility cults. Yeah, it's a connection of stones from the region of southern Sweden, from the region of Blekinge, and we have some interesting inscriptions here. We have the stones known as Kummarp, Stentoften, Björketorp, and Istaby, and they all seem to be referring some kind of ritual. Now, the first one, which has been lost, unfortunately, is quite a simple one. Hathawolf set 3 staves, and then we have 3 Fs. Most likely, the Fs stand for Fehu, which is yeah, the rune F, obviously, and it also stands for wealth. So it is probably an invocation of yeah, wealth coming to the community, or something of the sort. Then in the Stentoften one, which is the longest one, as you can also see here, I am yeah, just going to summarize it. So it essentially says, to the new farmers, to the new guests arriving, Hathawolf gave Harrywolf protection of the descendants. I commit here a row of bright runes, of mighty runes, and may an insidious death be brought to those who break it, and also protectionless perversion, or something like that. At any rate, the master carver invokes the infamous concept of ergi, so unmanliness, effeminacy, which was among the worst things that could have happened to you in the Norse world, and he invokes this to be yeah, bestowed upon the one who has the courage to break the stone. The indication would be to a kind of a ritual, because the inscription also mentions some stallions, and the general context of a bountiful year, some kind of feast taking place in order to, induce a bountiful, a fertile, prosperous year. And actually, the rune for that, the E rune for bountiful year, so it's not just a year, but it's a bountiful, it has to be a prosperous one. You don't have the full word, you only have the rune, which expresses that. So it does seem to be here a reference to a cult of fertility, a ritual taking place. And it's actually the curse is actually repeated on the Björketorp stone. Again, perversion should strike the one who breaks the rune, as well as an insidious death. And on the last rune, in the Istaby rune, we have again these names. Hathawolf, son of Herewolf, writes these runes in memory of Harrywolf. Perhaps it is not coincidental that all these people involved in this ritual carry this name referring to wolves. Perhaps it was also indicative of a initiatory ritual. Perhaps they were younger warriors involved in some kind of warrior cult. That is a tad speculative, but we do have the plates from Torslunda, for example, where we have these people apparently dressed in animal skins. What is called berserker in later literature. However, we also need to be careful here with these speculations. But at any rate, all stones seem to have indicated this idea of some kind of fertility ritual going on, with a potential initiatory significance for a small group of people, possibly warriors, involved in some kind of animalistic cult as well. Maybe, yeah. So it's this maybe is something we're going to have to live with, for lack of anything better, for lack of certainty. So as a broad conclusion to what we have discussed so far, first of all, we are dealing with southern amuletic traditions with magical connotations, as we have seen in these Leob inscriptions, for example, with an inspiration from Greco-Roman customs, on the other hand, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, we do have a more, let's say, local approach in the northern part of the Germanic world, with this more explicit ritualistic expression. Of course, we also have a chronological difference here, and the northern objects, especially these rune stones as well as rune sticks, they do seem to have integrated the local cults and local beliefs into this landscape. And you can speak from this point of view from a multifunctional runic literacy, because these references, no matter how flimsy they are to love and especially to fertility, they do indicate that runic, so historical inscriptions, definitely had a lot of usages and a lot of purposes. And when you say literacy, you not only refer to the ability of people to put their messages in writing, so the ability to create linguistic communication. It's also the ability to create cultural communication by using similar objects, for example, by transmitting these objects from one to another, from one community to another. That would have definitely helped with this whole discourse of literacy and at least kind of like a common thread of this world, despite its many variations and differences. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I do intend to continue with a third one on the topic, where I intend to look a bit on at the inscriptions dealing with curses and death in particular. That's why I wanted to split it, because there was a lot of material to cover, and my opinion, it's definitely a fascinating topic, especially since we are studying it from this philological historical perspective, devoid of any kind of agenda.
Oh. Uh-oh. Okay, maybe my camera is.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not sure what's wrong with my camera and why it's just black, but I'm not going to argue it right now because we got through the stream still. But thank you so much, as always, Irina. I'm going to put your YouTube channel back on the screen. That QR code goes to Irina's YouTube channel, where she has lots more content like this, including the past masterclasses that she has done with SASA. I can almost guarantee you that she will be back in August to do kind of the third part of this, or / another masterclass. So just look out on both of our social media channels for some advertisements for that in the near future. And as always, Irina, very interesting and wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm not sure if anyone,
Hopefully.
I'm checking the chat again now. But yes, if anyone has any last questions or anything, otherwise, we will have a wonderful
You
day.
can just write it in the comments, like in either of the live streams on my channel, on the SASA channel. Write a comment or your question, and I will try to answer it if I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us once again, Irina. Sorry, my camera's not coming on for me to
My
say
pleasure.
goodbye.
Hope it was interesting, and
Yes.
hope I contributed a little bit to a better understanding of the topic. Yeah.
Right. I definitely think so. Yes. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.